Recently, I was working on a side project where I was just making your standard Connect 4 app. And one thing that I had to do was create a two-dimensional array. And that got me thinking, what is the best way to make a two-dimensional array in JavaScript? So JavaScript does not have any sort of built-in support for two-dimensional or three or more dimensional arrays. So you really just have to make it yourself. So it's not hard. There are a couple different ways that you can do it. But obviously I was thinking, what's the best way to do it? There isn't really a best way, to be honest. But here are a couple of different good ways and ways that you might prefer depending on your style. So first of all, in declaring an array, there are a couple different ways you can declare it. You can either do just with empty brackets, or you can do with new array and then the length of it. So like, let's say this one, I would want to do rows. And let's say I've done that. When you're declaring an array with that new array methodology annotation, then it's going to create an array with that number of items, and they're all going to be empty. Okay, so when we log this out, it's going to say 10 empty items. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's not super important. It's not going to initialize them all to null. They'll just technically be empty. So that's one way to initialize an array. Let's go back to our square brackets. And let's call this, we'll delete this one, and we'll do myArray1, because we're going to be doing a couple different ways to make this two-dimensional. So the first way is to just straight up loop through and just do a nested for loop and create the two-dimensional array like that. Okay, so this would be like I is smaller than rows, I plus plus, and then within here we would initialize the array at that row to be a new array. And then once we've initialized that, then we can do our inner loop here where we're doing this when it's smaller than columns. And then we can set this one, do something similar here, where we're now going to access I at j, and we can set this to equal to null. We just want a 2D array. It doesn't really matter what we're putting in there. Okay, so this would be like probably the most straightforward way of creating a 2D array, I would say. And so before we had 10 empty items, right? And this time we will have, actually everything will be null. Okay, so this is giving us a 10 by 8 2D array, and everything's null. So if we do want to make that a little bit less code, let's say, what we could do is we could use the method that I mentioned before. So let's say we have rows here. So we'll create a new array with rows, and then we'll still need to loop through here. And in this instance, my array2.length in rows would be the same thing, so it doesn't actually matter what you put in there. And then for each of these, right, we'll want to have my array2 at I, and we'll set this equal to a new array with the length of columns. Okay, so this will also give us a new array. Let's move this up here, and now we can see the difference between these two. So these were all initialized to null. This is going to give us, we still have these null ones up here from the first one, and this is going to give us these 8 empty items. Okay, so this is a little bit fewer lines of code. It doesn't really matter that they're 8 empty items as long as that's okay with you. But this is just another way. A third way that we can do it, which is one-liner and maybe the most succinct, probably the most succinct, is we can say my array3 equals array.from, and then in here we're going to give it the rows, and then we're going to give it this callback here, and then we're going to also do a new array here. And so this is going to have columns. And then once we do this, it's one line, but it's a little harder to understand. It's going to do the same thing as here, where it's giving these empty items arrays. So if we log this out, then we're going to have, whoops, the same thing as the second one. Okay. So we run this, we see this one's giving us 8 empty items. The second one's giving us 8 empty items, and the first one's giving us all these null. Okay, so slightly different results there, but really if we just want a 2D array, then it's giving us what we want. The last way that you can do this, which isn't going to give us the exact same results, but is maybe the quickest and simplest, honestly, because arrays are dynamic in JavaScript. Really, the size of the nested arrays isn't that important in some cases. So it'll really depend on your case, but sometimes it'll be easiest just to honestly just make a bunch of empty arrays in here and just do it straight up like that. And then we can size these inner arrays dynamically. But this would be a little bit more verbose, I guess, depending on where you're coming from. And then obviously if we're going to log that out, it's going to be exactly what we just set it to. So here you can see the output is going to be these empty arrays. There's nothing inside of them. These ones have empty items. The 2 and 3 have empty items, and then the first one has null. So there are 4 different ways to create 2-dimensional arrays in JavaScript. Like I mentioned, there's no sort of built-in method for doing this in JavaScript, but there are a lot of different ways that you can create 2D arrays depending on your situation and how you like to write and read code. There will be one that's right for you, but probably not one that's right for everyone. Let me know if you have a different way that you prefer to make 2-dimensional arrays, or something that I haven't thought of. And hopefully this video helped you out, and we'll see you in the next video.